Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. This is a platform where we get curious about all things gender, sex and sexuality, as well as feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I'm speaking to Edalia, which is spelled Edalia, who is a spoken word artist, video designer and theatre maker. Edalia's pronouns are they and them. They are transgender and identify as non-binary. Find out what that means to Edalia in this episode. We also talk about acting, clothes, the TV show The Good Place, the gender binary, support groups, visibility and the term passing, gender options on forms, Hamlet, free speech, representation of trans people in the media and in comedy, and films like Silence of the Lambs and Ace Ventura. It was recorded on the 2nd of March 2019. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, welcome. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Edalia Day.
And how do you identify?
I am non-binary.
And what pronouns do you use?
I like they, them.
Mm-hmm.
I've just started using them recently.
Yeah.
And they're quite cool. I'm quite open. For ages I was like, I don't really care. People can use whatever. But I found people don't respond well to that. Not terribly. They don't like go, I'm going to kill you. But they're just like, oh, what do I do? So now I'm like, they, them. And if they have trouble, they can use either he or she or whatever.
All right. You're not all that. Do you feel quite precious about it now? Or are you quite like,
no, I'm totally like, I've always been blasé about it. I suppose I didn't know about the they, them thing until a few years ago. And I discovered it from people who were into the they, them thing. And was like, cool. And before that, I was like, I can understand if people were like, she or he, whatever. And yeah, I didn't adopt it because for me, it would be putting my sense of satisfaction and comfort and confidence in someone else managing to get the they them thing, which loads of people aren't going to, because it's a new thing. And there's a lot of resistance. People are like, oh, I can't do it. I can't go. But it's so difficult.
Singular they. No, it can't be done.
Oh, okay, it's just
impossible.
Yeah. So that's how I've always felt. But because of that, for ages I've been like, oh no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, whatever's fine. And a lot of people are just like, I don't care. I'm happy to do they. I just want. So
you just want to know.
Yeah. So I've been going, okay, and they do it. I feel really good. It's nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, what about your history or your background in gender? How have you been sort of discovering it, and when did you come out and all that kind of stuff?
So for my whole life, really, I've known that I was transgender. I've got like early memories of being 5 and just finding like dissonance between how I perceive myself. And the thing I always think is like, just when you're in social situations or you're in a classroom or stuff, and it's like girls this side, boys this side, and you're like, great, I go this side, and then they're like, no, you go this side, and it's like, I'm a boy, of course. A lot of my experiences of gender are kind of like, I suppose the way I describe it is it's like feeling like my body should be she, but isn't, or like it should be female and it isn't, and that's like there's all sorts of other things. It's a very complex thing with social stuff and physical stuff, but that's the kind of bare bones of it. And so there's like lots of moments in life, like physically or socially, where I just sort of growing up, it's like flicking a switch and the default is set to female, and then you go, oh no, of course I'm not female. Look at my body. What was I thinking? How silly of me. Yeah. So that's that. And then generally growing up, I found so I was really insecure about it for years, and there's so much terrible stuff on TV and on the media about trans people, like just lots of hate. So for like growing up, you're like, oh God, I can't be like this. You get this idea in your head that to be trans is to be a monster. It's like it's worse than being a murderer or something. So you're like, oh God, what? And so you suppress it, and you're like, I don't want to be that person. Why do I have to be like that? And it's a horrible thing. And so that was for ages. And then I sort of built up loads of ideas in my head about why I couldn't come out, or if I came out, my family would disown me, all my friends would reject me. They'd be like, I'm an actor, that's my job. And how many trans actors do you see? Like now there's like, in the last few years there's a few, but apart from that, none. So I love acting, and that's like for ages was like my reason to live, not in like a suicidal way, but just in a,
passionate
on death. I just love it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if I come out, I was like certain if I come out, I'm going to have to give that up. And it's like all these things. And I realized later on that they were actually, I mean, some of them, I believed them, but actually the opposite has been true. So since I've come out, I've actually found my acting opportunities have increased because
so cool.
I'm no longer pretending. Like when you're pretending to be straight, cis, male, and you're not, you're always going to lose those jobs to the people who are. And they're just going to waltz in and get it because they're confident and they know who they are in it. And now it's the same. I mean, I don't go for those roles. I don't get them. There's no point in me going for them. I play loads of wild, exciting, eccentric characters who are really fun. And I walk into that room and they're like, wow, this person's different. And they're confident and they know who they are. And like that's helped so much.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just thought sort of briefly touch on how you like to express your identity now, your gender identity. So how do you like to play with it? Sort of maybe in the way you dress or in the way you present?
So I do present in quite a feminine way, but also I've like generally got the frame of mind where I'm like, well, I am who I am, whatever I wear. So I dated someone in the past who was like, I think she said, you don't dress properly when you dress as a woman. And
what does
I was
that
like,
even
well,
mean?
because I dress I dress too like I'm going on a night out or something,
right?
And I was like, no. She was like pointing to pictures and stuff, and I was like, no, I was on a night out. That's when I was on a night out. Now is also dressed like a woman, but I'm not wearing jeans now. But I was like, I'm just wearing jeans. And she's like, no, now you're dressed as a guy because you're wearing jeans. I'm like, well, you're wearing jeans. Are you dressed as a guy? And she's like, no. And it was like, oh.
So debate going on there,
yeah. So
you mean for you, it's not how you dress; it's more about just how you feel, not necessarily about a gender.
Yeah, exactly. It's because I mean those. So I do dress differently, but it's like that's just the way I think about it is that's just an expression of that, as opposed to. I mean, some people it's different for different people and what people find works for them. It's all about how you find what you find makes life make sense. So some people are very much like, oh, I wear this clothing and it gives me this sense of empowerment and stuff. And I do actually have that as well. But so in like a roundabout way, what I try to do is go for a kind of casual feminine thing. That's my general aim.
Okay.
And for like the past 5 years, I've just been trying to take baby steps, taking little things that, because I'm like really insecure and anxious in life. So taking little things and adding them to my wardrobe and bit by bit replacing all the male stuff with more female stuff and sometimes just feminine versions of like feminine cuts of t-shirt and stuff and bit by bit. And now I've kind of got to a point where everything's feminine and it's quite cool. So I always feel like I get a feeling of empowerment when I dress how I want to.
Yeah, when just the way you feel.
Yeah.
It's expressing like how you feel.
Yeah,
in that
but
moment.
that's like in my room or in the shop or whatever, when I buy the item.
Yeah.
And then I find in public, I get really anxious about what people are thinking. And I'm like, oh God, because you hear all these things in the media and then this person got attacked and oh God. And so I get really, so for that reason, I do the baby steps of doing the things. And and it's quite cool because initially you're like, oh my goodness, I'm wearing nail varnish. This is people will be like, oh my God, you're trans. What the hell are you? What's wrong with you? And then you realize actually loads of people wear nail varnish. And one of the things I go off on tangents, as you probably noticed, because I'm doing that.
It's all good.
But I was watching, this year, I'm having this wonderful thing where I just make decisions and I do it, because for years I've been like, oh, I can't dye my hair or get highlights because what people think, oh, I go for a job and like for a guy, oh, I don't know. So I've been like, oh, basically I was watching The Good Place. Do you know The Good Place?
Yes, I love The Good Place.
So my partner was like, oh, which one are you? And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And then I realised I'm actually like a cross between Jason and Chidi.
Yeah.
But I'm mostly Chidi. And it was only watching that show and thinking about that I realised how much Chidi I am. I can't make up my mind about so many things.
Oh, yeah.
It's that
overthink central, isn't it?
Yeah.
He does that very well.
Or which chair do I choose? I'm going to sit on both of them in the middle.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. And I realised I do that so much. And so I was like, well, this year I'm going to, or I just started and it happened to be the new year. And I was like, I'm just going to do the things. And nothing's permanent, and some things are permanent, but also life isn't permanent. So I decided I get highlights and just wear what I want when I want, and not be like, oh, this defines me. It only defines you for the day, and then whatever the next day, and
change it again.
Totally. I was going to get my ears pierced, which I'm totally going to do, but I've been ill recently, so I haven't done that. But it's like I'm totally doing that, so I feel this total drive of I'm going to do all the things. It's really quite exciting and cool.
Nice. It sounds like you're in a good place for that. So I mean, when did you actually come out?
Oh, so the thing with coming out is like on the media and stuff. It's like on
it's
TV
like not
shows.
a moment, is it? Yeah. It's like gradual. So I think some people like come out to some people like reluctantly, and then when that goes well, they tend to come out to other people. So it's a process more than like that day I came out.
That's the thing. You think it's just going to be I come out, and then you realise actually coming out is a constant process, and with every new person you meet.
Of course, yeah.
But so I first came out in 2000 when I was 26. I'm now 34. Oh gosh. That's 8 years ago. Wow. I talk about, it was a couple of years ago. It's not this whole
feels that way,
time.
yeah.
So I was studying at Le Coq in Paris, which is this physical theatre school. And I just, personal life stuff. And then I just came out to one person. I was sort of like, life was just confusing. And I was like, you have all these expectations about life and how things are going to go. And then it just flips on its head. And I was like, well, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to come out to this person and see what happens. And they were totally fine with it. And I was like, what? It was not the response I expected. And so she really helped me just explore stuff, basically, and dress differently and all sorts of things. And then it's just loads of baby steps to do. I went to, it's like difficult, but I searched trans clubs when I lived in London. I moved to London after that. I searched trans clubs, went to them. A lot of them turned out to be sex clubs.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this isn't
not quite what I was looking for.
I didn't realise trans support groups existed, so I didn't Google that, and that would have been much better. But
that's not sex clubs, so it's just not what you wanted at the time.
No, so I went to these places, and there were places you could just hang out and not be involved in that kind of thing. And it was fine if people want to do that sort of thing, but for me, I'm not very in that sort of way. So I was like, great, cool, enjoying it. And then eventually I found a support group, and I went, and it was quite cool, but it was very binary, and everyone was there was like 20 to 30 years older than me, and a different generation, and I just felt didn't fit in there.
So until that time you mentioned the word trans initially, so did you feel like you were maybe trans at first, but obviously now you just said you had a trans non-binary, so I mean, when did that sort of shift happen?
I generally think of myself as trans and non-binary.
Okay.
And I use non-binary more as a term of how I express myself rather than necessarily how I feel.
Okay.
Because it's about like transitioning. Like there's the idea of you're trans, so you're transition from whatever gender you were to the new one, and it's a very binary thing. And once you come out the other end, you're this like perfect creation who fits in and can get on with society. But like, that might be possible, but also I'm like 6'4". I've got a naturally very bassy voice, so I can talk much higher. But I try and like pitch it in a way that I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
If I try to sound, so if I'm sure I could reach my voice really high and sound in a way that might get me through life and not clocked as being trans, which is generally the goal people do. But I would just would feel like constricting myself into this other shape, which would be too constricting for me.
Yeah. I mean, this term passing of its own right, I find it, I mean, it's kind of offensive, really, isn't it? And it reaffirms sort of the binary again. So why should you? Why should you have to?
Yeah, it basically says you can't. You know? It says being transgender is disgusting. And if you can get to the point where no one can tell you're transgender, you'll be acceptable.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's like, well, and I'm, as much as comfortably in society, I would prefer it if I could just fit in that way. And great, and people were just like, oh, you're a girl, it's great, whatever.
It'll be easier,
I mean, with all the difficulties that comes with, of course, but you're like, great, don't have to worry about that, but I don't have that option really. So, and loads of people don't. And I also strongly believe that it's disgusting to be like, being transgender isn't acceptable. So I very much fly the flag of trying to be visibly trans in a positive, affirming way for me, but also in a sort of, there's so much bigotry in the world, and so many, it feels like a lot of that's, well, I don't know, it feels like there's a lot of acceptance and that's on the rise, but it also feels like bigotry is on the rise as well. There's a lot
it works both ways,
right-wing stuff happening all over the world. And I sort of feel like if I can make a difference and be visibly trans and not fit in, but be a wonderful person because I'm very friendly and I get on with people, and people can go, oh, I had these preconceptions, but actually Edalia is just like a normal person who happens to dress a bit differently, and there are all sorts of people I could be hating, and this isn't it.
Yeah.
So if I can do that in whatever time there is before we get an apocalypse and, you know, global warming happens and then everyone's looting and killing everyone.
That's
then positive.
Let's get the positive messages out before we get that far. So just to sort of dig a bit deeper, I think, about the whole difference between trans and non-binary. So you were saying trans is often, not always, but often like from one binary to the other. Although I've seen trans people, obviously, who that's not the case for. But then if I look at my partner, they're now going more with non-binary because they don't feel like, you know, they kind of went from male to female. It's kind of like they went from one extreme, quote unquote, to the other, and then tried a bit of both and then found their way or their spot in the middle. And it's not that even that's a set spot, you know, that can change. So from what I've seen, they've now adopted more of the term sort of non-binary, and they go more by that sort of label, as it were. So do you have any more ideas about that?
Yeah, totally. So I'm kind of a similar bent, I suppose, and I've said I identify as a female sort of, but then I'm just expressing in a non-binary way, and that sort of works. But also sometimes I think of myself and like I feel like I don't totally fit into that female thing. So the sort of non-binary space is a nice one. But also the thing I like about non-binary is it's sometimes people are like, what does it mean? What does it mean exactly? I don't understand. And it's like the wonderfulness about it is that it's vague. And it's like you've got man, you've got woman, you've got non-binary. And it's like a kind of a very vague space, which loads of people, some people are cis and they will consider themselves non-binary because for them it's about gender expression, and some people are trans, and it's this big broad thing, and it's not, there are definitions, but also it's a very open thing which kind of spans androgyny and stuff, but it
doesn't have to be. It's unique to everyone.
I mean, there are loads of like, you know, 50 genders thing. There are loads of different genders which are really specific. People being like, this is exactly where I fit within the spectrum. And it's like demigirl or bigender or agender or juxera. There are so many of these specific things people have come up with. But with, the delicious thing about non-binary is you can just be like, I'm non-binary. And I'm happy to chat more, you know, for interview purposes, but for general purposes, you can be like that. And then that's all people need to all get to know. And if they need to know more details about transition or what you're doing or all these sorts of things that they feel inclined to know or they feel like they deserve to know, you'd be like, no, you can become my friend enough that I happen to talk to you about that if you need to know those things. But apart from that, you've just got these two boxes, male and female, and then this third one kind of somewhere in between or not or whatever.
See, that's a whole other discussion as well, isn't it? Like the whole tick boxes on forms and all that kind of stuff, because the whole male, female or man, woman. And sort of as the binary used to be, there's more and more options sort of appearing. And I was having a discussion in the group the other day on Facebook about what is enough and what is really not good enough. Would you say that for you the options of male, female or man, woman and non-binary would be a good step? There's always others though, isn't there? I mean, where does it end? I mean, I'd be content with that. I find that's good. Sometimes if there's an other, I write non-binary, and sometimes if on the recently I found the options with the Mr. and Mrs. and it says all put in your own, and I'm like, oh, MX. And then I've come up to theatre things, and they've gone, mix. Are these yours? And I'm like, yes, they're my tickets, thanks. And I'm like, haha, got a chance to do that. See, I feel sometimes I'm tempted to do that because in a way, for men, there's one, right, Mr. For women, there's Miss and Mrs. And it's like, what does it matter? It's none of anyone's business whether I'm married or not. Do you know what I mean? It's so old-fashioned, and it's like, I think that should change. I think there should be one for, say, male, one for female, and one for man, one for woman, and then, I don't know. I mean, where does it end again? But one of the things
I find is that, like, a lot of the situations, gender isn't important. So we've got all these preconceptions, ideas about gender and all this stuff, or man, woman and stuff, and like on your form and on your driver's license, on your passport. But you don't really need your gender on any of those documents. All you need is your name, and I don't think you do, because it's not.
I mean, I think people view it like as like your eye color or your height, or it's just like a marker to recognize you. But then the whole gender thing is so
but you can see that much by looking at someone.
Fluid.
Or you don't need to, like, if you can tell, or maybe you can't tell, you ask or whatever. It's not like it needs to be on your legal documents. I mean, of course, in like situations like sex segregated spaces, which are all difficult and thorny issues in the trans world, but I mean, so in those sort of situations, sure, but it's not like, I mean, there are so many things where you tick a box and you go male and female, or this is one, and it's like, well, maybe this is only useful for market research, you know, and even then,
true.
You know, so
yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, tell me a bit more about your coming out sort of story, because we touched on it briefly. But
so I went to trans support group, and I found it very binary, and people were very, like, they were nice, but I just didn't fit in. And I suppose for my whole life I'd been like I've been an outsider in lots of ways, and I've gone, oh well, when I find this group who's into this, finally I'll find my people. And then not find my, oh well, I do this thing, I'll find my people. And I was like, well, when I find a trans group, finally I'll find my people. But then I found that those weren't my people, because they're just a group of people who happen to be the same gender, basically. It's like if you're born female and you're like, I'm going to join a female group and then I'll find my people. It's like, no, because they're into all sorts of different things. It's just a gender marker thing. And so I was like, oh, lost and frustrated. And I sort of ended up just shrinking back into the closet for a while, because I was like, well, I didn't have anywhere to fit. I didn't, and when I say like people are binary, it's sort of, sometimes they fit into the stereotypes, because like, for the older generation of trans people, the only option for a lot of them was you come out, you fit the stereotypes and the cliches, and you just stick 100% as if your life depends upon it, and often it does depend upon it, into that mold, and you shrink away into society and just be quiet and meek and get on, and you cherish the spot you've been given in society.
Situation again, just on the other side of the binary.
You found a position and it's okay, and you're accepted, and that's all you can get, that's all you're likely to get, so just be happy with that. And so that's in their defense for fitting into those things.
Of course.
But I felt I was like, can't I just be a woman and wear jeans and a t-shirt? And it's like, no, you can't. What? You don't look. You're not convincing enough. You need to try really hard and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So I drifted away, and then a couple of years later, I was working on a play directed by Leo Skilbeck, who's this really cool director who's done some really cool genderqueer theatre with like switching genders, and it's all really cool. So I was in this. It was a children's play, but Leo was directing it, and I just chatted to them about stuff, and they did all this queer theatre, and I went to see their show in Edinburgh and was like, whoa, this is like theatre for me, but I'm in the closet. And then I sort of tiptoed around the idea, and we went to a Halloween party together, and I dressed as a vampire Audrey Hepburn, and sort of
awesome.
People were really positive, because all Leo's friends were really like in that world, or just supportive, and some of them were my friends as well. I didn't realise they were joint friends, and I was like, well, hey, and I sort of came out of that party, I guess, to people. I was like, well, actually, this isn't like drag, this is kind of me. And they were like, we should dress like that more often because you look really good. I was like, thanks.
Yay.
And then I went out for another Halloween party as Ophelia from Brutal Legend, that's a game by Double Fine Productions, who are a company I'm really big fan of. And she's like this slightly undead.
Slightly undead.
She's like not undead to start with, and then afterwards she becomes undead, kind of like a vampire type person. Okay. She's kind of blue and all gothic and really cool. So I went out to this Halloween thing as her, but I got stood up, and then ended up meeting I met loads of new people, and it was really nice. But the company I was working for, they all saw me out. I was saying, I'm going as this girl character and stuff. They were like, cool, yeah. And then when they saw me as I was leaving the hotel, they were like, oh. Because I was like full on cosplay and looked awesome. And then that was like a sort of visual way of coming out to them. And basically, Leo introduced me to the whole world of queer cabaret in London, which there's like Bar Whatever and all sorts of great places where people can like go and do stuff and not be in between. And I started doing like queer cabaret myself. I made a burlesque song, which totally wasn't me, but I tried it. And I sewed sequins onto this whole outfit, which is always like, that's cool. And I did comedy cabaret. I started saying I was doing drag, but it totally wasn't drag, because I was just a trans person on stage, not being especially fabulous, just singing songs and stuff. Yeah. Go to a comic. And people were like, oh, what's your name? And I came up with the name Edalia, but they were like, oh, Edalia, like Edalia sleeps around a lot, or can I swear on this?
Go for it.
Is it like Edalia sucks a lot of cocks or something?
Yeah.
You know, because like that's not those names, but if for drag, it's all like, oh, you've got this really kinky name, which is all saucy and sexual and all sort of thing. And I was like, no, can I just have a name? And I'm like, that's not right. So I just didn't fit into that thing. But I started doing more and more just at all sorts of events, not like queer events, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
And then just bit by bit, I've since then got more confident in normal life, coming out to people and stuff. And I came out to my parents, I think like 2 years ago, and it was really nerve-wracking. And a friend at the time was really helping me through the process. I was really like terrified because you hear so many people get rejected by their parents. Lots of people get kicked out of their home, disowned completely by parents and stuff. And I was convinced this would happen because I like paranoidly thought about every little thing that they'd said over the years and what about this thing and blah, blah, blah. And then I came out and my mum was like, I did it on the phone. My mum was like, oh, well, that's okay. You know, you don't even need to say that kind of stuff. You just be who you are and stuff. It's fine. And then I was like, would my dad be okay? Because like he's lovely, but when I became a vegetarian, he was all really like, oh, well, you know, I need meat in this meal. And so he acted a bit like, oh gosh, sort of every meal needs to have meat in it and stuff, which sort of feels like a vegetarian is feminine and this is a masculine thing. So I thought, how will he react to the transness? And he's a vicar, but he's a lovely vicar. He's not a vicar if he listens to this. He's like a dean or a deacon or some kind of thing, and I always get it wrong. A minister of some sort. He does funerals and weddings and things in the church.
Okay.
But and he was like, oh, sure, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, one of the vicar people is a trans woman, so it's okay. I was like, what? Oh, okay. So that was really wonderful.
Oh, that's good though.
Yeah.
Because like you say, a lot of people don't have that experience.
Yeah. So I mean,
really,
I'm totally aware of my nice family privilege. And that is a totally positive thing. I've got friends who've had bad experiences and stuff, so it's like great. So
how do you bring sort of say your gender identity or your gender expression into your work? Because you do poetry, poetry now.
So I do loads of things. So I'm a theatre maker, a poet, a animator. I do like projection mapping. And theatre maker, a musician. I do lots of stuff. So basically, I make shows. And so I work as an actor, and then since 2014 I've been making my own theatre, and I tour it around the country. Most of my shows have a lot of spoken word poetry in, and it's basically me on stage acting and doing poetry, and I have loads of animated video projections that I project all around the space. And I do songs and all kinds of stuff. And I've got 2 shows at the moment: Super Hamlet 64, which is Hamlet in the style of a computer game, which isn't especially gendery, but I do have loads of cool things like Ophelia, who I've since chatted to fans of Ophelia from the Shakespeare play, and they've like taught me about her, and I actually see it's quite cool in her own right, and loads of people relate to her. But initially when I started making the show, I read her as this depressingly wet character who's just like, basically Hamlet's going a bit mad, and she was in love with Hamlet, and Hamlet was in love with her, and then she's like, oh God, my life is over, he's not into me anymore, what do we do? And then her dad dies, and she basically drowns herself in a lake. And I was just like, this is too wet, she's got to be powerful and awesome. So I made her the hero of the game of the thing, and basically Hamlet's like a non-player character who just chats throughout the whole thing, and it turns out that she's been going on adventures, and the end boss battle happens, and she's the one who...
Sounds a lot better to me.
So so the people I've chatted to have been like, well, actually Ophelia's the only real person in the piece, and Hamlet's just this wild, ridiculous person, but she's going through serious things, and her dad dies and stuff, and then and a lot of people with depression have related to her, so whatever. But so since then I've gone, oh, okay. But as my version stands, it is pretty cool, and I totally relate more to Ophelia and use Hamlet more as a vehicle for criticising misogyny and the patriarchy and those kind of things, and like white privilege or male privilege, all those kind of things. I do like stuff. I've got a character selection, difficulty selection screen where it's like, oh, I realised I was playing life on easy mode, and I thought I was thought it was top dog, but actually I just got given all this stuff because I was a rich Norwegian prince, or no, Danish prince. So I've got that one, and then I've got Too Pretty to Punch, which is a show all about it's like transphobia, especially transphobia in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more like a straight spoken word show or a queer spoken word show. And I'm doing that at Edinburgh, in fact, this year. Yeah, so if anyone's listening, or people are listening, of course, come to that. That show talks all about like some trans activist type people are really aggressive, and that's wonderful and great and powerful. You mean it? Another Leo is really passionate and like, I'm not putting up with this shit. We're just got to change stuff. But I'm much more like, hey, it's fine, do it. I'm not like, transphobic is fine, it's not fine. But it's like, okay, I see where you're coming from. I understand your perspective, even if I disagree with it. But I just want to help you out by saying, here are the things that you maybe have read in the media which are actually untrue. And here are this one was true in this thing. And I explain things in a very calm way. Getting
more
people
diplomatic.
More diplomatic. And then I've got loads of comedy songs and the serious, hard-hitting stuff as well, just to, wrap it up in a beautiful package. But one of the largest things about it is about the media and, newspapers, social media, TV, how every time there's like a thing about trans people on the news, they always invite like an expert on trans, like a trans person, and then they invite someone who knows nothing about trans people or just hates them, or is like, we've got to get both sides of the debate. And I've got this bit in it where I'm like, oh, do you do that on everything? When you have football commentary, do you bring someone on who loves football and someone on who's like, well, they're just a bunch of overpaid idiots, aren't they?
Yeah,
is that
kicking the ball around, like a bag of air around.
I mean, fine if you're going to do that, but do it for everything rather than. And actually, since then, I've realised they do that for climate change, and I was like, oh, okay. They invite someone who knows about climate change and someone who's like from the oil industry who goes, well, no, it's nonsense. I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I've decided this is nonsense, and I should have as much airtime as anyone else, or it impinges on my free speech.
Yeah. Oh well, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I hope that goes well. Okay, so how do you feel like it affects people? How gender issues and trans and all that is portrayed in the media?
So at the moment, I think it's brilliant that there's so much visibility of trans people in the media, and loads of positive role models, lots of trans people who are actors and actresses around the world, Laverne Cox, Chaz Bono, all sorts of brilliant people doing all sorts of incredible things. It's great, and social media helps that. But growing up, which is something I chat about in my show, there was so much negativity. There was only negativity. So it gives you this impression that as a trans kid in the closet, you go, well, who I am is unacceptable, and you internalize those things, and you're portrayed as a monster, and you're only presented as like the evil character in what's that Hannibal film?
Oh, Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, this is the thing. It's the one representation of you is as the murderer, the horrible person, the monster. You appear on shows like Jerry Springer as a laughingstock. You're the mockery, the butt of the joke. And this is also the thing with comedians. A lot of comedians are like, oh God, I should be able to joke about what I want. People getting offended all the time. It's not fair. Throwing their toys out of the pram. Especially like Ricky Gervais recently did a massive 10-minute thing against trans people.
Did he?
Yeah, on his last set and last thing on Netflix. And he's like defending it. Oh no, not talking about trans. It's just one trans person. It's not no offense, but it totally is. But it's like growing up, trans people are only presented in the media as the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
So if there was representation of all sorts of things, if you saw just normal trans people on soaps and stuff, which there now are, and that's lovely. If you saw that and all sorts of representation, and it was quite great. And by the way, a comedian just decides to do a joke about us. It's like, okay, cool. It doesn't matter because, we've got well-rounded role models and we feel really confident about who we are. But if the only way you see yourself presented is as a joke in the playground, as a joke in TV, comedians tearing you apart and saying this is a disgusting person to be. If that's the only thing, it's just gonna be terrible for you. And one example that I wanted to talk about was Ace Ventura, which I loved as a child, and it's so great. He's so brilliant, Jim Carrey, with his comedy and his expressions and stuff, and I loved his shows. But then, like at the end of, I think it's the first one.
Yeah, I think so.
The bad
spoiler
person,
alert, but if you haven't seen
spoiler
the film,
alert. The bad person turns out to be a trans woman, and it's this big discovery. It's like, oh my God, the guy we were hunting for was actually this woman all along. And in order to prove it, there's this really comic, in inverted commas, scene where Ace Ventura strips her down to her underwear, ripping her clothes off in front of all these police officers, and she's like, what are you doing? And then he's like, gosh, you just look like a woman because you.
And she's standing cross-legged, right?
Yeah.
At that stage. Yeah.
And then they flip around, and it turns out there's a bulge in the back of her knickers where she's tucked her penis, and then all the guys are like, "Oh my god!" and they're throwing up, and it's like, "Oh my god, they convinced us we're a woman." And Ace Ventura's like, "Oh my god, I kissed her. I feel like I'm soiled now. This is disgusting."
Yeah,
and that's like incredibly offensive.
It is really, and interestingly, I mean, we were talking a little bit about this before, but I read an article where it was mentioned. And it was sort of just spelled out, like not even in that many words. And it's also a film that I've always found really funny. And I do like Jim Carrey, and I like Ace Ventura 1 and 2. And that just made me stop and think, oh my God, that is really not okay.
Yeah.
It's really actually, that's really bad. But it's only now that I've started to sort of think about it in that way. Because I think in the past, you kind of don't know any better. Not that that makes it an excuse, or not that makes it right. But it is just something you just have a laugh at it, and that's it. And it's, I'm now looking at it from my perspective as I am now. I'm thinking that is really, really, really wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And a lot of people nowadays, so this has been brought up in news topics, and people now, this is one of the troubles with how some people understand offence and this idea of people suddenly being offended. They go, oh gosh, now people are suddenly offended about this stuff. They weren't offended before. They were totally offended before, but the internet didn't exist. So no one had a voice. The only people who had the voice were the cis, straight, white, male people who dominated the media. So there were loads of trans people. I watched this as a kid, and sure, I loved the rest of the film, but I was like, what the fuck is that? It's really unacceptable. And even as a 7-year-old, I was sort of disbelieving that that's what that was, because it was like, what? That's just, I don't know. But and that tells you, that's the thing. It tells kids that this is unacceptable. This is disgusting. Oh my God, what a disgusting creature a trans person is. And it's like I say in my show, it's like, do you think kids don't see this? They see all the media. They see everything. They grow up with this stuff. It ends up infecting them. It's not. I find it quite disgusting.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I mean, from my point of view, I've never questioned my gender, so I come from a different perspective in that way. But I never really gave it much thought, to be honest. It was just something you laughed at, and even saying that makes me feel like, that was really not cool. It just because I now realise it's not cool doesn't make it okay then, because it really wasn't.
Yeah.
But I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And
totally.
It's just what you see around you. And it is, I think, that ignorance, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think the more people, are not confronted with, but the more people meet gender diverse people and talk to them as human beings and hear their story, that's one of the main reasons I'm doing this podcast. So yeah. Well,
that's great. But also, a lot of people when you criticize someone, they get defensive, and which is a natural reaction.
Yeah.
But people often have a very black and white idea of themselves. Am I a good person? Am I a bad person? You say, oh, well, you shouldn't have laughed at that. And they go, no, it's fine, because I'm a good person and I'm justified. And it's well, we're all made of nuances, and it's okay to think that something's funny and then later go, actually, I've changed my mind about that. Or, it's all fine. It's fine to also, because nothing's perfect. You've just got so many people who are really flawed, and it's really frustrating. But we're all flawed. Yeah. And it's perfectly fine to enjoy the first, 50 minutes of Ace Ventura and then go, well, I really don't accept that part. There's a problematic part of it. Yeah. But you can enjoy problematic material, but just be aware of the things and go, well, I disagree with that, or,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and along with that, this idea of things being problematic and learning about the trans stuff. I've learned loads of things. Leo is a different Leo to the one who started me on this journey. Yeah. But really wonderful person who's also non-binary. So Leo's disabled and has taught me so much about ableism in a similar way. And it's the thing that there are so many different ways you can be privileged in society, or benefit from things, or not realize that your behavior is damaging. And in the same way that trans people were the butt of the jokes, disabled people were also the butt of the jokes, and still are, a lot. Totally. And it just makes you confront it. And then some people are like, well, who can we joke about if we can't joke about it? It's like, well, joke about the genuinely horrible people, all the manipulative politicians. But there are plenty of people to joke about who deserve it, Yeah. And there's so many things I'm doing a project at the moment, my new play that I'm writing. It's called Spectacular Space Bots, and is about an autistic robot who travels through space and basically wants to be a human. And it works with the problematic idea that if you're different, you have to act normal in order to be acceptable by society. And so, a lot of autistic people mask their autistic behaviours in order to, at great stress to themselves, in order to look normal and be accepted. And this is and eventually throughout the story, the robot realises actually they're cool the way they are and screw the rest of the world, sort of thing. And it's got lots of like disabled characters and people who are all similar outsiders who sort of join in the sort of Wizard of Oz motley crew. But I was going somewhere with this. But so in like a lot of comedy or just in like general life, it's considered acceptable to if there's someone who's autistic or a little bit different to play tricks on them and make them the butt of a joke. Like there was someone who was really sensitive to sound, and people in the office thought it'd be hilarious to clang some cymbals right next to their ear, and they panicked and sort of burst into tears and stuff, and they were like, oh god, it's so funny, oh Derek, he's so ridiculous. And it's like, this is torture,
really not okay,
and it's just monstrous behaviour. And but it's like, oh, they're a bit different, we can do what we want, there's just there's so much, and you secure words. I don't know, it's just monstrous. And of course you realise that's bad, but then sometimes everyone can slip into something becomes normalised and you just don't think about it until it gets pointed out.
Yeah, until you sort of wake up and think, hang on a minute, is this really okay to laugh at? Yeah. And I think on some level we do feel it, we do sense that in ourselves, like, hang on a minute, you're just sort of not quite laughing as hard as the rest, and then the next time you're like, actually this is really not okay. Yeah. And also laughter's supposed to come from a mix of two emotions suddenly. That's like the science. You get two emotions really suddenly, surprising, and you laugh, and that's how that happens. So often laughing is about our insecurities. So all these things we'll laugh more because we're insecure about it. Doesn't excuse it. I mean, there's different kinds of humour as well, isn't there? Because I think humour is a great way to deal with different emotions or difficult emotions as well. And I'm all for sort of making jokes if it helps me, with a personal situation. But that doesn't necessarily make it okay to do that to other people. It's kind of up to them, isn't it? If they want to make fun of their situation, if it helps them cope, that's their decision. But it's not okay for me to make fun of their situation. So that's the difference there.
It's like that punching down thing. In comedy, it's generally accepted that you can punch up to people who've got it better off than you, but you can't punch down to people who've got it worse. Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes people break those rules and you're a bit like, maybe they're getting laughs or they're getting cheap laughs, and it's like, no. Some people kind of do it really well, but it's because it's not aimed at other people directly. It's kind of like in a roundabout. I don't know. Some people are really clever with it. There's some, I saw Jimmy Carr's stand-up recently on Netflix, and he's really offensive. But that's his thing. He's really offensive. But I got really riled by the Ricky Gervais thing. But what Ricky said he was doing is kind of what Jimmy did. His stuff is really offensive because it talks about paedophilia and all sorts of things. It's just offensive content. But he doesn't talk about specific people, and he also makes jokes about him being offensive. He does it in a way that, I couldn't listen to the whole thing because it got to the end of this is just too weird layers of kink and sexuality and stuff. I was just like, okay, fine Jimmy, but I'm just going to switch off. But it was very funny, and there were lots of funny things, and even though there were things I was like, oh, that's wrong, he did it in what I consider an acceptable way. I'm sure other people will listen and go, no, that was unacceptable, but it's like in the ear of the beholder, I suppose, isn't it? But it really feels like he's not. I really like what's his name, Russell Howard. Yeah, I like his stuff because he's kind of really quite innocent, isn't he? Although he does make, I don't know how he does it, but I just think he does it well. He's just a likable character in that way, and he's not I don't find him offensive. I think I've only seen him on Mock the Week, but I know he does loads of stuff. It's supposed to be great. Good old comedy. So I was thinking to wrap it up, I suppose, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything you want to say? Anything you want people to know? Basically, I just feel like it's really wonderful that we're having this conversation and that I'm on this podcast and you're doing this podcast with all these gender people. And it's just wonderful. I feel like a really positive place about how the world is going, or this country at least, and how people are getting more open to gender variant people, and just basically realizing that we're not a threat, because a lot of people are terrified. Oh my God, we've got to have those people near children or whatever. And it's like, we're nothing to worry about. We're generally just quiet, normal people who sometimes are a little bit nerdy and some of the least threatening people. I mean, there will be people who are trans and horrible people, because there are people who are male and horrible people, and people who are female and horrible people.
Totally,
there are going to be those people who exist. Yeah. But on the whole, we're no more threatening than anyone else. And it's really lovely that the world is seeing this. Also, a thing I found touring my show, like, I'm from Swindon. I've just moved to Norwich, and I'm from Swindon, and it doesn't feel like a place you can be openly trans as much as Norwich does, which is lovely.
Norwich is very sort of friendly, isn't it?
Yeah.
That way? Yeah.
But I made this show, and I made it in Swindon, and I toured it. I did like a short tour, and I was really terrified because I was sort of coming out to loads of people in this show, because even though I was out, I would be in London and be visibly trans, and I'd be in like Norwich or Ipswich and be visibly trans, but then I went to Swindon, I would just closet myself a little bit. So I did the show and was really worried, and I found people were actually really positive. And then I'd be more confident in how I presented generally, and I'd find people in the corner shop, they're fine, and most people are fine. And doing that show, it's just really opened my eyes to how supportive lots of people are, but also uncaring in a positive way. They just, people don't mind. They're about their own lives, doesn't matter. And it's so easy to, because of the way transness is, or non-binary stuff is portrayed in the media, it's easy to, you only hear those voices. You don't hear the voices of the people who are fine and not talking about it. So it's easy to internalize those and be like, oh, I can't cope. But you look around at society, people are dressed like goths, people are dressed like all sorts of different things, and how I'm dressed is not especially different, and I'm not doing anything harmful, and people are generally accepting, and it's just really wonderful. I mean, touch wood, that just continues. And
absolutely.
I think we're in a good place, and the more accepting people are, and the more open people are about being accepting. It's like when you're in a safe place and in a comfortable place, reaching a hand out to people who aren't and going, hey, come and join in, because sometimes they don't know that. That's the thing. I'm so tangenty, but it's like some people think, well, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the gender thing, so I don't need to bother talking about it. It's fine. We don't care about it. It doesn't matter. But there are loads of people who are so insecure because of the media and everything that, or they've had a bad experience, or a bad family experience, that they don't know when they look at you whether you're a supportive person or you're like one of those really unsupportive people, and it's too unsafe to come out or to be open. Sometimes it's nice just to give a helping hand and go, hey, and as a more open person now, I dress more visibly, and if we see someone who seems like, I'll just strike up conversation and try and be open and make it a positive experience thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good. More of that, please. Yeah. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Nice. Thanks so much for having me.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Edalia, where you can also read the transcript. And you can find out more about Edalia and their projects on their website, edaliaday.co.uk, which is EDALIADAY, where you can also find how to stream their show Too Pretty to Punch, which I was fortunate enough to see them perform live. Very much recommended. If you are interested in learning more about how trans and gender diverse people are represented in the media, the Netflix documentary Disclosure by Laverne Cox is very enlightening. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.